Thank you very much also for the nice introduction, and also thank you to the organizing committee for allowing me to give this presentation. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some of my thoughts and drawings with you. I am Bart Geerts. I'm a professor researcher in fine arts at Lucas School of Arts in Belgium. That's the biggest art academy in the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium. And I'm also an associate professor at the Institute of Philosophy of the University of Leuven. And LUCA as an art academy and KU Leuven as a university have a close collaboration on all research matters, which partly explains my double affiliation. But I'll not go into these kind of institutional matters at this moment, but I'll show you what I will be talking about today. So that's quite easy and basic and simple. There's an introduction, and I will briefly introduce a specific project, which is called the Daily Drawing Project. And secondly, and that's the main part of my presentation, I will try to give you an impression of the glossary project, which actually accompanies the Daily Drawing Project. It's a kind of lecture performance, and in doing so, I hope to give you a fairly good idea of that glossary, of the daily drawings, and the kind of research that I am currently doing. While I will be talking, you will see a selection of my daily drawings. They are put in an animation, and that lasts exactly 20 minutes, so that will also be, the last drawing will also be the cue for me to end my presentation and come to some kind of a conclusion for this presentation. If it works, of course, technically. The daily drawings did not specifically start as a research project. In fact, it was deliberately not a research project in the sense that quite some of the research projects that I have been involved in during the last years were all projects that came with funding, local funding, international funding, European funding, and hence they were all projects that were written out in project applications, often years before the actual project started. And I think you all know, or most of you know, this kind of project application procedure. You have to have like a clear design, clear research questions, clear objectives. You have to have a kind of predefined methods, and you have to have a more or less predictable outcome of your research project. So the Daily Drawing Project was actually none of that. There was no overall plan except to draw on a daily basis and to publish one drawing a day on my personal website. Everything was allowed, and ideally that still holds true, despite the fact that for obvious practical reasons, all the drawings have been made on A4-sized paper. That's because the A4 size somehow feels very familiar to me. It's easy to handle when I travel, and at the same time, it's big enough to ensure that what I do does not immediately turn in this kind of very miniature, finicky kind of thing. So, additionally to that, there's also a more technological reason. The A4 size is the maximum size that I can create a digital scan of on my personal scanner, and that makes it easy, of course, to have this digital copy that I can then publish on the website. The glossary, as you can read in the abstract in the book, is an ongoing project that aims to build an understanding of a drawing practice and of drawing in general. It's a kind of way to interact with the daily drawings in a more word-based language. So it aims to establish a kind of meeting ground, a place, an invitation to interact with the drawings, to learn from them, and to reach out to them and also to others. So in this case, it's a way to reach out to you as well for this presentation. Okay, time to get started. There we go. So I'll read you the glossary items, give you a short description, and then I'll go. The first one is archive. Archive as a productive storage capacity that invites one to wonder. All attempts at categorization hopefully lead to rediscoveries and acts of digression. The only way to navigate the archive is to get lost. in a positive way that was, for instance, described by the French writer Georges Perec, who cannot be accused of lacking a methodological, meticulous, and rigorous approach in his writing. And every time he was trying to arrange his books, he always discovered books he had somehow forgotten along the way, which led him to acts of rereading instead of rearranging and classifying. Articulation. The intention to describe in some way, in a different language, by different means, in another medium, what one is doing. Michael Schwab used the phrase to practice as research. Practice first as a verb and then as a noun. So to articulate in order to offer multiple perspectives to your practice. Common. As an adjective, it can be said of things that we can and therefore should share, adopt, and adapt. As a noun, it refers to resources of any kind that can either be freely used as source material or that are made available for others to use. Some of my daily drawings start by wondering about something I read, I saw, or experienced during the day. Something from my specific perspective. Sometimes there's a word or a concept for it, often there is not. And that experience is only rarely directly recorded in a drawing. More often, it acts as the starting point for something like an image search. I often use the Commons, which is part of the Flickr photograph website. It's a gateway to some, and I quote, some of the hidden treasures from the world's public photography archives that have received the label of no known copyright restrictions. The good thing is that the Commons always lead you to somewhere else. If you enter a search term, all kinds of images appear, not in a Google-like fashion, mixing heavily sponsored content with personal preferences and all of that in a complex algorithmical search query. Not at all so. The Commons is not interested in what I'm looking for. The Commons shows what other people have inserted as tags, as metadata, or comments on photographs. And it shares that irrespectively of my personal perspective, personal belief, or interest. So the initial starting point is nothing more than a starting point. It's a point that triggers a chain of events, scrolling through photographs, for instance, and that makes me wander further and further away in a common territory made up of visual landmarks. And sometimes one of these becomes a reference point for a drawing, a specific shape, a color, or a frame that suddenly triggers the drawing of the day. Last year, in an exhibition at Wheels, which is the most important center for contemporary art in Brussels at the moment, I saw a beautiful silkscreen print by the French artist Lise Duclos. On a magenta colored paper, she had printed in French, "Le commun n'a pas de verbe," to be translated as "the common has no verb." And indeed, the common is an adjective or a noun, but it is not too difficult to imagine a verb associated to its often complex and wide-ranging semantics. To common as a way to share, to adopt, to adapt what we already have in common, and to do so in diverse ways. The digital twin, the digital counterpart of a handmade drawing. As I said, the daily drawings are scanned so as to create a digital twin that can then be published online. Through this process of translation, there's always a reduction of the material traces of the original drawing. However, there is nothing wrong with that. Twins, even identical ones, are never identical. There may be a clear physical resemblance that can be cultivated, controlled, or denied, but there's only rarely, at least to my belief and experience, an explicit wish from the twins themselves to be identical in all respects. So the digital twin is free to lead its own life soon after the scanning procedure is over. and then the hierarchy of the original versus the copy is no longer relevant. Digital scanning is actually an interesting procedure because the machine takes over, and the only thing I do is a basic automated color check in Photoshop and a slight adjustment of the file's exposure to make sure that the whiteness of the page I'm using does not completely blend with the white background of my online archive. Photographing the drawings might also work, but I lack both the patience and the know-how to translate the drawings into photographs. The hand and the eye needed for pushing the button and framing the image have already been involved in the creation of the actual drawing in the first place, so they do not need to interfere with the creation of the digital twin. Drawer. A drawer can refer both to a person who draws and also undraws, or to the place where drawings are stored. A drawer, as a person, always tries to gain access to an imaginary drawer as a place that contains all potential drawings. It's perhaps the visual counterpart of the Library of Babel that was described by Jorge Luis Borges. To fumble. The disinterest I have in virtuosity in drawing. I do not believe in virtuosity in drawing. Rather, I believe in the moment that you no longer understand what you are actually drawing or what it all means. The state of wonder about what you do not know while thinking that you know exactly what it is you are doing. Mika Hanula, a longtime advocate for artistic research, has talked about artistic research as an act of fumbling of a sort. And the irony of fumbling is that no matter how hard you try, how systematically, how rigorously, how methodically you practice it, you are not supposed to ever fully master it. Mastering the act of fumbling would be the end of fumbling altogether. And I quote Mika Hanula here, the point of calling artistic research an act of fumbling is that this fumbling is not the aim. It's just a means for us to get going and to get somewhere else. Fumbling as an act of focusing on the various misunderstandings, discrepancies, luring wishing wells, as well as the nasty operators that we're surrounded with, going with full force and attention into the act, but then letting the act lead you to another place, another side, a side that you can't get to via the shortest route, not with the help of a manual and definitely not intentionally. The hand, the part of the body that's crucial to execute a drawing. Sometimes the sensation arises that the hand takes over control. Drawing as a learning process that prioritizes the hand and the eye over the mind, a process in which doing leads to visual and tactile wanderings. If you're open to let the drawing guide you, to give the drawing the chance to reveal something you did not think about beforehand, you might actually start to undraw the drawing. Horizontal. The lying position of the drawing while it is created, as opposed to a vertical position of hanging a drawing against the wall. All the drawings are made lying flat on a horizontal surface. This position might in fact be a factor that differentiates the drawing from more painterly work that's often executed vertically, horizontally, or through a combination of both. The horizontal surface creates a firm basis that can easily support the hand when drawing. So drawing uses a specific scale and technology of the hand as opposed to that of the body. Imaginary migration. The exploratory process of looking for a new place to stay for a while. Imaginary migration is nothing compared to actual processes of forced migration due to geopolitical, economic, or social factors. It's a kind of luxury migration. Inventor. Somebody who invents things, imagines them, or allows others to do so. Francis Alice, who is now representing Belgium at the Venice Biennial, is a typical inventor based in Mexico City. And I quote here from a note he wrote in 1993. As an artist, my position is akin to that of a passerby who constantly tries to situate himself in a moving environment. My work is a succession of notes and guides. The invention of a language goes together with the invention of a city. Each of my interventions is another fragment of the story that I am inventing, of the city that I am mapping, and in my city, everything is temporary. Nearby, that which is close at hand, within reach, or intimate. My drawing practice does not aim to represent, visualize, or illustrate reality, concepts, or projects, but on the other hand, it starts from or tries to keep to what's close at hand and uses that to start a conversation. Sometimes I start by drawing and tracing the outline of whatever it is that's lying on my table, a box, a glass, a sheet of paper. So drawing not in the sense of to draw something or to make a drawing about something, but rather drawing as an attempt to get to know what is happening right in front of you and through the process of drawing itself. To realize how you are shaping the drawing and how it shapes you at the same time. A drawing that is not predefined, but that defines the drawer. Of course, I'm indebted here to Trimina's notion of speaking nearby, her cinematic speech act that, and again I'm quoting here, that does not objectify topics and subjects, but that reflects upon itself and is capable of approaching topics and subjects from up close. Recording, capturing something in a different medium. Perhaps drawing can be considered as a kind of recording of something that is not clear yet. A recording without knowing what it is that you are recording. Along the way, you may evidently lose track of what you are actually recording. Perhaps John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds is actually a drawing. A score, an invitation to interact. Every drawing, however chaotic it may be, contains some kind of structure. Think, for instance, about the structure Roland Barthes has found in the drawings of Cy Twombly. The structure then can function as a score, both a trace of something that has happened and a starting point to retrace, to recreate, or reconstruct that happening and to go beyond it. Selection. The process of selecting a number of drawings for an exhibition. When there is an opportunity to show the actual drawings in an exhibition context, I invite someone to make a selection from the drawings. That someone, the curator or the president of the selection committee, can also reflect on the space that's available and align it with the selection process. How many drawings will we show? Which drawings? How do we group them or not? The invitation to select is also an invitation to become part of the daily drawing project, a way to activate the drawings. The curator is then invited to the studio space to go through the archive of drawings in order to make the actual selection. And the whole process, conversation, is audio recorded. The recordings will be used as input for a separate work, a side project, which is called The Selection. Eva Cardon, who made the very first selection, is a young colleague of mine that I did not know that well in advance. After the selection, she said she had the feeling that she got to know me quite well through the drawings. Translation. Going from one state to another, a deliberate act of displacement. Can you translate something that is not yet given, something that you do not yet know, or that you are not aware of knowing? Michaelo considers acts of translation as an essential task for the artistic researcher. And I quote him, "I think that one essential task of the artist researcher is to provide well-articulated passages between different media, languages, or modes of articulation." I'm keeping an eye on the slide so that I can see whether my 20 minutes frame actually works. Undrawing. The first meaning, to draw open or aside, to pull back a layer of fabric, a curtain, for example, that you undraw to see what is behind it. The second meaning, to clear or erase part of a drawing. To undraw in that second meaning is not the most typical use of the word, but it makes sense. If drawing a curtain means to close the curtain and undrawing refers to the act of opening the curtain, one could easily infer a similar relation between drawing in the straightforward sense of sketching and undrawing. If the act of drawing results in something like a picture, a pattern, a diagram, or in general a trace, then undrawing might refer to the process of erasing, deleting, or hiding. So undrawing as a dialectical way of drawing that undoes the drawing in order to be able to draw again. It's this interaction that often makes drawing and art in general so interesting, to show what's hidden and to hide what you want to show. Showing and hiding how something can be shown or hidden, and that again and again, but it's never completely new. In ancient Greece already, this dialectic was made visible by the legendary painters' battle between Horatius and Zeuxis. As is well known, Zeuxis had created a painting depicting grapes, and they were painted so convincingly that as soon as the painting was uncovered, the birds immediately came to pick at the grapes. The painting made by Horatius, on the other hand, was still waiting behind the curtain. Zeuxis, of course, wanted to see the work of his rival, and immediately wanted to undraw the curtain to see what was on the painting behind it. But of course he was fooled. Horatius' painting was the curtain itself. In all its apparent disguise, it had been plainly visible all the time. A kind of undrawing of the highest order. I'm going too quickly, but unpower, the opposite of power. The delicate process of keeping track, of being in charge, and, on the other hand, of losing control of the drawing. Allowing for proliferation and digression. Undoing the power relation the drawer might hold over the drawing. Confronting the drawer with his or her disability to draw. Undrawing the drawer's doubt, hesitation, fear, longing, and failure. Establishing a relationship of true reciprocity. timing wasn't ideal, but there are some drawings coming up. But I'll go through them in a little bit faster mode, if that works, until we reach the conclusion. There we go. This was, of course, a sort of speech performance of a work in progress that will actually lead to a text, and that will be something quite different from what you've heard, because it will, of course, use all the graphical potential of the written word and all the logics associated with glossaries and dictionaries. Things like references, cross-references, links, etc. At the same time, the actual drawings will be largely absent from the scene in the text version of what you've just witnessed here. They are then literally waiting to be discovered. There were some references in my glossary items, but I explicitly want to mention one more artist, the Belgian artist Joël Tuurlings, who in 2012, on the occasion of an exhibition in Wales, published her lexicon, which was subtitled A Compendium of Terms for Exhibition Matters and Materials. This publication has been a great source of inspiration for my glossary project, and for those who do not know Joël Tuurlings or the publication, it's an extremely interesting example of a research project that was never framed as a research project in the first place. The glossary is by no means finished, and working on it should perhaps also become a daily practice in itself. A dialogue to establish connections between the visual and the verbal that might disclose, or rather undraw, the kind of tacit knowledge that artistic research is always looking for or is always trying to grasp. So this glossary is not intended as a description, a guideline, or a summary to the daily drawing project. Rather, I hope that it will function as a kind of research method of translation, something that I have called earlier in previous work a mediated act of redescription. So this presentation, the drawings, and hopefully soon a more established version of the glossary are also meant as an explicit invitation to enter the dialogue. So I'm very much looking forward to all kinds of collaborations. Other people doing drawing, writers, dancers, people who want to show the drawings, anyone who has some kind of affinity to what I have been showing you and talking about is, of course, warmly invited to collaborate or to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart, very much for this really polyphonic presentation, this picture, or German Bild maybe is more appropriate, and spoken language, this glossary with explanations and drawings. There was really not illustrations, but if I am allowed to use the term from Possible World series, counterpart of thinking. That means in some possible world, people are using drawing when we are using thinking in language. And one additional thought or remark. You mentioned this famous composition by John Cage. It has 3 scores. The third is verbal. The first is just pure lines of notes, and the second one is drawing. Well, question, please.
Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. It helped. Thank you for the presentation, and it helped me and reminded my practice behind my postdoctoral study. I took a year of drawing as well, the first year, and the presentation helped to formulate for myself what it brought to my study. Yeah. So the first was confidence. As I did not draw 17 years when I graduated Art Academy, and I started to draw daily drawings. It was a year long. Initially, I thought that I'm not able to draw anymore, but at the end, of course, finally, I even created an exhibition. Mm-hmm. The second was self-management, I would say, self-discipline. And the third is mindfulness of self. Mm-hmm. But what the practice of artistic practice gives you in your academic work, research, and as well as a human itself. So there is something else behind the screen that we don't know, or even cannot formulate. But it helped me really much, these 20 minutes, formulate what artistic drawing gave to me.
Thank you, that's a nice comment. I recognize it because in the Art Academy that I'm working and also at the university, I've done different things, and I've been, for more than 10 years, I've been involved in all kinds of policy making and doing big collaborative projects, and that's somehow a completely different mindset. That, I mean, you use the experience you have, but it's a completely different way of thinking and working. And actually the daily drawing project was for me also a way to somehow re-enter another way of looking at the world, of being a human, being a researcher, being an educator, working with young people and things like that. So I recognize, of course, the comment you make on it. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And